welcome back to Xtreme Football Talk, hosted at Lake Orion High School. As always, I'm your host, Manzo, joined today by co-hosts Mitch Howell and Blaze Lauer. In today's episode, we talk about the biggest winners and losers from Week 5 of the XFL regular season, take a look at some seriously great top plays, and go beyond the playbook for analysis of some of the league's most conceptual plays. Stick around. Week 5 of the XFL season had some huge games. We saw the Battlehawks losing to a Defenders team that came back from a terrible Week 4 loss. We saw the Vipers lose a game to the Wildcats under the lights. What else did we see in Week 5?
I think we saw Houston continue what they always do, win football games. And the ending, I know a lot of people had a lot of speculation on what happened at the end of the game when there should have been 2 seconds left on the clock. Even the rules analysis guy said so himself, but then just kind of deflected the whole question of the game was over and they just kind of got off the field, the refs went off the field. So I know there's been a lot of talk about that. And the ball would have been on the Houston's 20, and they would have had a shot. Seattle would have had a shot.
With a scoring opportunity. Now, the XFL did release a statement and pretty much said, yeah, we were wrong. Our officiating crew was wrong. And the head of that officiating crew was actually reassigned, is what they said in their statement. So that was a big turning point in the game. Now, in an NFL game, the interesting thing is they were down by 9 points. Now, in the NFL, it's okay, you have one chance to score. It doesn't matter. But in the XFL, when you can score and get that 3-point conversion, that's a chance for them to tie up the game. But is Houston really the only consistent team that we've seen right now? And that's they're 5-0, obviously the best team in the league. But week in and week out, they've looked consistent. And what does that mean? Because friend of the show, Kalee, who had a great game, he said that they're not even reaching their full potential right now.
I think the reason Houston's having such success is because of their quarterback. I think a lot of these teams are having such a hard time finding somebody that fits their system or runs their offense correctly, and I think Houston's kind of just meshing in terms of their offense, defense, and everything's pretty much just clicking because they don't have too much to worry about because they feel confident every day when they're playing, as you can tell on the field.
Yeah, they look really good. Now the Defenders, who lost a bad game in Week 4, come back. Cardell Jones got the start, but he actually threw an interception at the beginning of the game, and Tyree Jackson came in and got the win for the Defenders. What did we see out of them in Week 5?
I think we saw both teams actually didn't do too well. DC only averaged 1.2 yards per play. St. Louis, 2.9 yards per play. Cardell Jones got benched after he only threw 2 passes, one being an interception. But we did see Tyree Jackson come in the game for DC, and he threw a touchdown pass, which eventually led to their win.
Yeah, that was huge. Now, the Battlehawks actually looked really good in the open field. They were getting some good run plays inside with Jones. They were going to the outside with guys like Damian Washington down the sideline. But as soon as they got in the red zone, it felt like they were done. It felt like that Jordan Tamu offense, they couldn't get anything done in the red zone. And we saw because they only really converted on a couple of field goals. But I thought they were, possibly pushing a number 1 spot in the power rankings, but that game really put them behind.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that everyone was probably sold on St. Louis, up to that point, and I think they played a sloppy game. But I don't think that I'm necessarily not bought in still. I think that it happens. Teams like this are going to go up and down, but they still do have a steady quarterback, somebody who knows how to run their offense, and Tamu is just a phenomenal player, and I think, with the running backs that they have, they're just a solid team overall. And, it could have just been a bad week for them, but I think that there's still a lot of upside to that team.
Yeah, and a team who had a breakout week was the New York Guardians, who absolutely dominated the Renegades. Now, the Renegades did not look fantastic with Philip Nelson at the quarterback spot in his first true start since Landry Jones went down, but the Guardians came out and looked great. Perez had a great start. He found his guy, I think, in Mikal McKay on the outside, and they're kind of showing how that New York offense and passing attack can be really good. Now, what does that say about the team? Because 2 weeks ago, we had them in the bottom of our power rankings and in the XFL power rankings, and now they're possibly, I believe, a number 3 or 4 spot in the league.
I think, it was just the beginning of the season by then. Those guys don't really know each other. But by now, Week 5 going in, they're starting to get their groove, keeping it good for the end of the season, coming up.
Yeah, that's big. Now, when you talk about these guys, like you said, they're starting to get to know each other. They had never played with each other before this season. Now, as we go on into the season, we're in the second half of the regular season. Now, 5 games down, 5 to go, and then the 2 playoff weeks at the end of the season. Do we think we're going to see some more consistent play and kind of have teams set into certain spots as we kind of build chemistry?
At this point, I don't think it's fair to say that we will see a consistent play because of where everyone is at right now. But I think that as the league grows and, these players are playing together with each other more, the teams are definitely going to start, clicking a little bit better and figuring out, their system and their way of doing things. So, I mean, it's still early, and you can't just come out of nowhere and start a football team, So it's a struggle, but I think they're getting there.
Yeah, it takes top to bottom, GM, head coach, which actually is the same position right now in the XFL,
Right.
which is really unique, coming down to the level and the support staff and obviously the players who make up a big part of this league. But week 5 for me was the week of the new faces at quarterback. We talked a little bit about Tyree Jackson on the Defenders. We talked a little bit about Philip Nelson and the Renegades. Another guy was BJ Daniels for the Dragons, who actually got his first true start. He played a little bit last week, but he came in and he added a new element to that Seattle offense. He's a dual threat guy who can get out of the pocket and actually looked like sometimes he chose run over the pass, which is something we don't see out of a lot of XFL quarterbacks. So what did we think of his performance?
I think he did really well. They kept it in one-score game with Houston, who is the top team in the league. He's kind of like a P.J. Walker sort of guy.
Okay. He did look really good. Now, his stat line here, 14 for 22, 114 yards passing, and 10 rushes for 30 yards and 2 touchdowns. When they got into the red zone, I think him running, they had some designed quarterback draw plays and run plays that were really good. He walked into the end zone twice against probably the best team in the league in Houston. Now, the Dragons are at the very bottom of the power rankings this week, even though I thought they played really well and kind of slowing down that Houston offense, especially in the first quarter. The Dragons were up 14-0 against the best offense in the league.
Hot, yeah.
What happened? What made the wheels fall off?
It's hard to say exactly. I mean, the game was, very entertaining in the first half, obviously, and it ended very entertaining. But I think Seattle still showed that they're not at the same level Houston is. I mean, they came out hot. They started, probably excited, ready to go and take on the, 4-0 at the time Houston team. And they came out there and they proved a few people wrong. But I think that, they're still a long ways away from being at the caliber that, Houston is playing at.
We talked a little bit about all the games from the league's matchups in this Week 5 of the XFL, but now I think it's a good time to take a look at the Week 5 top plays. The Defenders fans are taking the 10 spot with possibly the biggest beer snake to date, with over 1,200 cups adding up to over 19,000 ounces of beer consumed by the DC fan base. One of these cups even came from Commissioner Oliver Luck, who made his contribution during the game. Play number 9 brings us the second kickoff return this XFL season, this time from Austin Walter of the Renegades, who gets downhill and utilizes a good blocking scheme ahead of him to cash in 6 points and the much-needed Dallas touchdown late in the third quarter. Mikal McKay shows off the hand strength and body control at play number 8, as he and Perez are showing just how dangerous this Guardian passing attack can be on this 20-yard completion. Play number 7 is a moment that Boogie Roberts is likely never to forget, scooping up the ball on the sack off Taylor Cornelius and rumbling 23 yards for the score for the big man. We're heading back to DC, though, for play number 6. This time, it's LaDamian Washington from the Battlehawks with the twist and grab down the sideline for a 28-yard gain to keep the St. Louis drive alive. Making our way into the top 5, LA quarterback Josh Johnson delivers a sidearm strike to his tight end Jordan Smallwood, who makes the rest happen with his legs before finally getting pushed out of bounds within the 5-yard line. The Wildcats tight end group represented well this weekend, much in part to this Randy Moss-esque catch from Daquan Hampton in the corner of the end zone, who goes up and over the Viper defender. Taking the number 3 spot and possession away from the Roughnecks, Seattle defensive back Jordan Martin battles for the ball off an errant throw from P.J. Walker and drags his left toe in bounds to solidify the catch for an overall impressive play. The second best play from last weekend features another takeaway, this time off the tip from the Guardians' Ryan Mueller, who recovers the ball himself and takes it all the way for a New York touchdown, looking very reminiscent of a certain J.J. Watt on that one. Rounding out our top plays at the number 1 spot, Defenders running back Jarrell Presley seems to be stopped by 4 Battlehawk defenders before regaining his balance and literally stepping over the pile for a big game and a shock to that St. Louis defense. Gotta learn to wrap up, fellas, or Jarrell is gonna make you pay for it. With some of those play calls in mind, who should we be watching this weekend to make a big impact on the games?
My guy's going to have to be Kenny Robinson from St. Louis. He plays safety. He's 6'2", about 200 pounds. He's not the biggest guy, but he can fly around the field. He can cover, be a one-high type guy, and he can cover the whole field. He's got NFL type speed, and that's part of what I wanted to talk about. Is he came to the XFL after playing 2 years at West Virginia, which in his sophomore year he got all Big 12 safety and had 77 tackles and 4 interceptions. At St. Louis, he's been doing a phenomenal job. He's got over 20 tackles this season, 2 interceptions, a sack last week against DC. He flies all around the field. He's got a phenomenal backstory. His mom's battling cancer back in Pittsburgh, and that's part of the reason why he came to XFL, was to follow his dreams and to be able to provide for his mother. He seems like a really great guy, and he's chasing his dreams at the NFL, and I hope the best for him. But he's definitely somebody who's going to be exciting on Sunday if he does get there, and I love watching him at St. Louis.
Yeah, that's huge. Now, a lot of the guys from the XFL have different motivations. Maybe it's for a mom supporting family members, or they just didn't make the cut at the professional level. Blaze, who are you watching to make a big impact in Week 6?
My guy this week is going to be Josh Johnson, quarterback for the LA Wildcats. He threw 4 touchdowns this last week in their 41-34 win over the Tampa Bay Vipers. He propelled himself into second in the league in passing yards. Over the last 3 games, he's had 9 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions. Despite his 4 touchdown passes last week against Tampa Bay, he did throw an interception on the first play, fumbled the ball twice. At the beginning of the game, wasn't taking care of the ball very well. They were down big before halftime, but utilizing all of his tight ends, his running backs, his receivers, they were able to score 41 points, which helped them get the win.
That was an offensive explosion against a Vipers team who actually has had 2 very good showings in back-to-back weeks, and who I think deserves to get a win here in the next couple weeks. But the guy that I want to talk about and watch in Week 6 of the XFL is the 6'8", 257-pound tight end from the Dallas Renegades, that being Donald Parham out of Stetson University in DeLand, Florida. Parham's got the size and athleticism to be a great tight end at any level, and he can move when he gets in the open field. He hit speeds upward of 21 miles per hour on a catch and run in Week 3 against the Dragons on his way to the end zone. And to kind of put that in perspective for you guys, Tyreek Hill, one of the fastest players in the NFL, who's 5'10", 185 pounds, runs at speeds of 23 miles per hour. So Parham is in great company, especially for his size. He has over 300 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns on the year, and is becoming one of Philip Nelson's favorite targets in the open field. I do think they need to get him a lot more targets next week, because obviously last game he did not have the same type of impact. Parham only had 4 catches for 34 yards in Dallas's loss to the Guardians on Saturday, but I'm looking for Bob Stoops and offensive coordinator Hal Mumme to get him a lot more targets this weekend. So kind of talking about this weekend, let's look at this weekend's matchups. Luis Perez and the Guardians look to prove that they have arrived against the league's best offense in Houston at 2 o'clock on Saturday, followed by Battlehawks Vipers at 5 in an XFL East matchup that could shake up the division standings. Moving on to Sunday, the Dallas Renegades travel to D.C. looking for a bounce-back win over Tyree Jackson and the Defenders at 4, which leaves the Wildcats and Dragons to battle it out in Seattle for the 7 o'clock game under the lights. Now, fellas, what games are we looking forward to most this weekend, and what team needs to have a big Week 6?
I think the Battlehawks versus the Vipers is going to be an exciting game. Both teams are, in a little bit, having a little bit of upside, but at the same time, not exactly found where they're at this season. And these 2 teams, I think, are going to deliver a great game, just like Houston and New York are going to do. Just that whole Saturday is just going to be awesome to watch football. But St. Louis, I think, is really going to step up this game and show everybody the kind of team that they are, especially after having the week they did last week. But the Vipers are definitely not going to go down easy, as we're seeing. They're a very versatile team.
Yeah, the Vipers are definitely, a team on the come up, I think, as far as the offensive side of the ball. And St. Louis, who has been a team prominent in the power rankings the last couple weeks, had a down week. So this is going to be a very interesting game. Now, it's in Tampa, so I think, whatever kind of home field advantage the Vipers are going to have might help them a little bit. And another game, like you talked about, is that Houston Guardians game, which kind of has the same dynamic. Houston obviously has been the model of consistency throughout these first 5 weeks of the XFL season, but the Guardians have looked really solid. So that's going to be a game I'm definitely going to watch.
The game I'm going to look forward to is that game, New York versus Houston. A couple weeks ago we had New York as our last team in the power rankings, but now they've gotten back-to-back wins. Houston, even though they're undefeated, their last 2 games have been within 1 score. So going on the road, it could possibly be their first loss of the season. I know home field advantage is kind of big in this league. DC being 3-0 at home, St. Louis being 2-0 at home. So we'll see what New York has to show them.
Yeah, now the Renegades are also playing the Defenders this week. That should be an interesting game. Now, obviously, the Defenders with a new quarterback, Tyree Jackson. That should be a really kind of new dynamic that right there with that Renegades-Defenders game. And also, we have the Wildcats at the Dragons. Now, the Dragons, who looked good against Houston last week, the Wildcats might just be primed to explode on the offensive side. So what are we expecting from that game?
Honestly, I think the Wildcats and the Dragons are somewhere around the same boat right now. I think they're kind of just fitting in with the rest of the pack. But I think that, as we've seen, that, you know, just like all the other teams, they have a tremendous upside, and they're starting to figure things out. And I think that, you know, especially this week, being week 6, I think that teams are going to start to, you know, have things more figured out, more planned out, and it's going to be a little bit more organized, especially at this point. So I think, you know, whatever team is going to step up this week and get the win, that's going to show a lot about, you know, what team's being prepared, you know, later on for the rest of the season.
Now, one more question for you guys. If we were to pick a team outside of the top 4, like a Houston, D.C., St. Louis, in that area, what would be one team that we think could have a push late in the XFL season and make a possible playoff run?
I think I'm going to go with L.A. You know, they've shown the ability to score lots of points. Josh Johnson is starting to get in his groove. The whole offense is starting to get in the groove, really. So I think I'm going to go with L.A.
I think I'd have to agree with that. I think Los Angeles is, you know, just like Blaze said, getting in the groove and, you know, starting to figure things out, without a doubt.
Yeah, now LA will have a big game this week trying to take out the Dragons, who are number 8 in the power rankings as far as last week's XFL rankings go. So LA should be primed to explode, like I said, on the offensive side, and I'm thinking I'm going to pick them in that win too. But that wraps up this week's episode of Xtreme Football Talk. Thank you for tuning in, and come back next week for more in-depth conversation and analysis from our favorite highlights around the league. On behalf of my entire crew and my co-hosts, Mitch Howell and Blaze Lauer, for the love of football, I'm Kobe Manzo.